So on behalf of Bryant's Alumni Association, welcome to the first of a series of webinars designed to share alumni professional expertise with Bryant graduates and students. And before I turn our program over to our presenter today, Jay Weinberg, and our facilitator, Marissa Crean, I need to provide you with some ground rules for today's webinar, which will last for about an hour. All participants are in a listen-only mode. However, we encourage you to comment and ask questions using the question and answer feature located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. After today's presentation, you'll receive a survey. Take a moment to provide your feedback, as your comments are valuable to us as we expand our professional development programs for alumni. So at this time, I'm going to turn the program over to Marissa Crean. She's a member of the class of 1981 and director of the Financial Development Program at the Hartford. Marissa is an active member of Bryant's National Alumni Council and also serves as a career coach for alumni. Floor is yours, Marissa.
Thanks, Tim, and it's my pleasure today to introduce Jay Weinberg, class of 1985, as our speaker. He is president of the Jay Group, a marketing services company. Jay began his career as a computer programmer after Bryant and then moved into marketing in the early 1990s. He started his company in 1999 and has written and spoken extensively on marketing strategy. Jay and his colleagues have helped many international brands improve results. I'm happy to turn the microphone over to Jay and today's presentation on taking the entrepreneurial plunge.
Well, thanks, Marissa. It's great to be here. Thanks, Tim. And thanks, everybody, for joining. I'm really looking forward to this. Just to give you a little bit more background on myself, as Marissa mentioned, I started the Jay Group in 1999. I was 36 years old at the time. It was my first entrepreneurial venture, and I had done a little bit of consulting and then took the plunge, literally went in head first and haven't come up for air since, actually. It's been 17 years. It's been a really nice run, a lot of good ups and downs, and it's been interesting. So I also have had a lot of investments in other businesses, as well as a lot of experience with the Bryant community. I've done a lot of work with the CEO of the College Entrepreneur Organization on campus, as well as Bryant Ventures. Some of you may know about the new venture competition. Some of you may even have been part of that. I've been involved with that since the very beginning. I think we did 6 years of that, and it's been a really interesting competition on campus, the new venture competition. So I've been a judge for the past 6 years, and as well as just personally mentoring a lot of folks who've been interested in taking the entrepreneurial plunge. A lot of Bryant alumni who've done very well for themselves, and I spent a lot of time with some of our younger alumni working on their businesses and helping them succeed. So it's been really very fulfilling for myself. So why don't we go ahead and get started. I'm, again, Jay Weinberg, president of the Jay Group, and a member of the class of 1985 from Bryant University. So let's talk about what we're going to discuss today. First of all, I want to talk about full-time entrepreneurship. So this is about taking the plunge. This is not about sticking your toe in the water, doing a few things part-time, potentially having a business on the side. This is about diving in and doing it as a full-time entrepreneur. And I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't. In fact, I think it's a good idea in most cases to test the waters. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, but this is going to really focus on being a full-time entrepreneur. And we're going to ask the questions: Are you ready? Are you ready to do this? Considerations. We're going to talk about some of the considerations of what you need to consider when you're thinking about going full-time as an entrepreneur. And I'm also going to talk about some resources. I'll show you some resources that have been very helpful for me and helpful for others. Okay? So when it comes to entrepreneurship, there's a number of different, it's not just one thing. A business owner can be many different things. And these are just a few of some of the more popular ways that you could call yourself an entrepreneur. So, for example, a freelancer, and that's somebody who just performs a service for various clients, typically without a company. So you'd be your own company if you're a graphic designer or a bricklayer or whatever. You can do work for other people, but not be an employee, not be a W-2 employee. Typically, it's a 1099. Sometimes you don't even have your own company. You just get checks made out to yourself. And those are, well, you could be a freelancer, and certainly you do that full time, some people. A sole practitioner, that's where you have a business, you have a company, but you're typically the only person in the company. You see that with a lot of professional services, but many other industries. So, for instance, if you're a lawyer or an accountant, you may have a firm kind of hanging out your shingle, but you're the only person in the business, and that's the way you want it. You don't want employees. You don't want, in many cases, a lot of the overhead that comes with a larger company. But certainly, that's full-time entrepreneurship. Another would be hands-on owners. You may want to be a hands-on owner, and in that case is where you own a business and you are actually working full-time in and on the business. That's what I would consider myself. I have a company. I have employees. We have, in our case, clients, and I do a lot of the work. I do some of the client work. I do some of the business development work. I work on the structure of the business. I do a lot of this stuff. I'm very hands-on. And that's probably what most entrepreneurs, when you think of an entrepreneur, that's what you think about. Another is a hands-off owner. In this case, you could be a full-time entrepreneur, and you may own 2, 3, 4 businesses, and you have other people running and managing those businesses. So in that case, you not only have people working for you as the folks who are actually performing the service or developing the products or whatever, but you actually have a management team in place. So there are people who are running the businesses. I have a friend of mine who actually owns a business. He's an entrepreneur. He runs the business. He owns the business, and the business is in Switzerland. And he has an entire staff there who runs and manages the business. He keeps an eye on things and goes over there 3, 4, 5 times a year to for meetings and whatnot. But he's more of a hands-off owner. And I think that's probably the place where we'd all kind of like to be, where you own the business, but you don't necessarily have to run it. Another one is a partner, and that's where you have other folks who are working with you, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in various levels of ownership of the business, maybe all equal partners or different stakes in the business, but you're partnering with other people, and you may or may not have other employees. Certainly, you could be a full-time entrepreneur in that case. And the last one is a consultant, similar to a freelancer or a sole practitioner. And in this case, it's more on the service side of the business. So you are consulting other companies in your respective field, and as opposed to being a full-time employee, you are typically hired on as a consultant. Now, this could be where you have one customer or one client, and you're there full-time. Some of you who work for larger companies probably have this in your organization, where there's people who literally work full-time just like any other employee, but are not actually employees of the company. They're consultants. And in those cases, they're actually full-time entrepreneurs. So there's 3 main factors when it comes to deciding whether you should take the plunge or not. And we'll go into some of these, and I'll tell you a little bit more about kind of how we want to lay out the presentation. First of all, there's your business. Now, that is about the kind of a business that you want to do or that you're in, and because those are so different from everyone, it's really hard to make this presentation focus on the business, because there's so many different kinds. Product business, service businesses, all different industries. Another is outside influences. So these are things that are kind of not necessarily outside of your control, but not within you as a person or as an entrepreneur, something within who you are as a person, but things that are outside. It's about your family, it's about your situation, monetary situation, it's about where you live, things like that. What outside influences are factors to help make you decide whether to take the plunge or not. And we will talk about a lot of those. And lastly, it's you. And that's really the most important thing, is yourself and who you are as a person, what you feel, what you think. So, it really does come down to you. Entrepreneurship and taking the plunge and whether you should do this or not really comes down to you. Entrepreneurship always has risk involved. So you need to understand that there's going to be risk and be able to tolerate that risk. Are you willing to work harder? In most cases, if you work for yourself, if you're an entrepreneur, you will work harder than if you're working for another company, because just of the nature of things that you need to do beyond what you need to do to get to get the widget out the door. There's other things that you need to do, so you will have to work harder. And then passion. Do you really feel that this is something you have to do, that you really want to and need to do this? If it is, truly inside of you, no one can tell you whether you have it or not. You really just have to know that this is something that you need to do. And a lot of this actually happens to be with, is about your family background. I actually happen to come from a family of entrepreneurs. My parents, my aunts and uncles, they all own their own businesses. And I grew up that way. And I've always had it in my blood and always knew that I would do this somehow. So for me, it was never really a choice. It's always been my passion. So really, it comes down to attitude. And, as I say, it's hard work. They say that entrepreneurship is, our entrepreneurs are people who are willing to work 80 hours to get out of working 40 hours. So a lot of it is about your attitude. So what I want you to do is ask yourself these 3 questions. And this entire presentation is going to be, there's a lot of things in here that you may listen to and think, oh, that doesn't apply to me, or that's not right. The answer to every question is it depends. But these are some things that are kind of interesting that I found unique in being an entrepreneur, and what makes or breaks a good entrepreneur. First of all, how often have you changed jobs? Now, if you're older, if you've been on the job force a long time, you've had the chance to change jobs very often. If you're a new graduate, you probably, it's not really relative to you. But this is something that people have found to be a very interesting indicator on the success of entrepreneurs. And what they found is that people with a steady job history are more likely to succeed. And that may seem a little different than what you'd expect, where people who were not comfortable in jobs with other companies, they can't work for anybody, they should be an entrepreneur. It's actually the data finds differently, is where people who are steady in their jobs are actually the ones who have more success as an entrepreneur, because they're less impulsive. They're people who work through issues. They're very focused on the current and not always looking ahead at every opportunity. As an entrepreneur, it's very easy to get distracted at opportunities that pull you away from the straight line, that pull you away from where you need to be. So job hoppers typically are always looking for the next thing and get bored easily and lose focus. And again, this is just typical. This is not everybody. So look at yourself and know, have you really changed jobs very often, or have you been pretty steady in your work life? And if you've been pretty steady, you typically have the demeanor to succeed as an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs need to learn how to say no. That's one major thing that doesn't happen often enough. Okay. Another question is, what do you like best? And I'll give you 3 choices here. First is selling. Do you like to sell? Are you a salesperson? Second is delivering. And then what by that I mean, do you like to actually do the work? Are you an accountant? Do you like to do that work? Are you a bricklayer? Do you like to do that work? What else have I used as examples? Are you a lawyer? Anything like that. Do you actually enjoy the work doing and getting that done? And the third is managing. Do you like managing other people? And the data shows that people who like to sell typically make the best entrepreneurs than people who are actually doing the work or managers. So, if you have a passion to sell, if you enjoy that kind of the process, you tend to be able to be more successful as an entrepreneur, and it's more likely that it'd be a good idea to take the plunge. So, people who are selling, they're used to pressure, they're used to risk, they're used to working for commission. Okay? Another question is, why are you doing this? What's the impetus behind why you're thinking about becoming a full-time entrepreneur? If it's because you hate your job or you find yourself unemployed and there's not a lot of chances for reemployment, you can certainly be successful, but it's a low chance of success. It's typically in those situations, it's people who are kind of waiting for the next job opportunity to come along. Hating your job is not the reason to become a full-time entrepreneur. It's the reason to find a different job. If you have a passion for entrepreneurship in general, if you like being an entrepreneur, then you have a good chance for success. You have I'd say a medium to higher chance for success. If you really love this and just need to do it, I think you're going to, good chance that you'll be successful. And then, of course, if there's an untapped need, if you see a real business opportunity that is just so solid, you've tested it, you've tried it, that's when you really have a higher chance for success. Whether you want to be an entrepreneur or not, if you just know that there's something out there, gosh, I've got to do this, then you're going to have a higher chance. Okay, so let's consider a few things. I'm going to just talk about some things that we might want to consider when it comes to taking the plunge. First of all is life stage. There's always a good time to start. When you're, from being an entrepreneur, I don't care if you are a high school student or you're 87 years old. It doesn't really matter. There's always a good time to start. And however, the fewer distractions you have and the more support you have from the family, the less friction. Life stage does make a difference when it comes to those outside factors that I talked about earlier. This is a big one. So, it's about the people around you. It's about where you are in your life. There are better times. Again, it's not the major factor because, your business, your passion, your monetary situation, there's a lot of other things. However, if you're younger, if you're still single, it may be a better time for you to take the plunge than if you are married with a couple of young kids and a wife who doesn't work or a husband who doesn't work or something like that, or you're the main breadwinner. It can be it can be a lot of friction and a lot of pressure. And again, it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. I have a good friend of mine who was working for a consulting firm and had I think his kids were 6 and 8 at the time, and his wife didn't work, and he went out and started his own firm with a partner, and they did extremely well. So, there's a lot of other factors, but life stage definitely puts some pressure on you. If you're older and maybe you've already retired, or you've got a great pension, or there's not a lot of pressure on you, and you want to start that business you've always dreamed of, great time to start the business because, again, there's not a lot of pressure. I have one of our Bryant alum friends who was in the new business competition, and he struggled over this a lot. He was 24 27 years old, I think, 27 or 28, and had done his business part-time for a while and was really considering taking the plunge. And he and I had a couple of very good conversations about it. He ended up doing it, and my advice is really, listen, you're in your 20s, you've done great in your job, you've got some money in the bank, you had a girlfriend but wasn't engaged or married, and now is a great time to do it. It's just go ahead, and he did, and he was very happy that he did. So life stage, though, it's very important. Next is your financial situation, and of course that's a big one. What are you willing to risk when it comes to money? And this can be, there's a lot of businesses out there that you can start for nothing, but you really can't. It's kind of a myth, because there are so many there's so many other expenses that people don't even think about when it comes to starting and managing and running a business, as well as income opportunities from other sources that you're giving up because you're starting and running this business. And a lot of it is, well, I'm just going to. A lot of times it's like, I already have this client or these 2 or 3 customers that are going to come with me, and I'll be profitable from day one. My business was profitable from day one, so I felt, well, do I really need money in the bank to support myself? And the answer was, you really kind of do, because if you're going to have to create an infrastructure around yourself, around your business, in order to succeed and grow. It's not about the present, it's about growing the business. So it's important, and you should give yourself a bottom line. That's an important part of it. So what am I going to risk here? And that bottom line can be, I'm going to do it until we don't have any more money in the bank for the business in the bank, and I'm not going to borrow any money. And then if that ever happens, I'm going to shut the business down. Or you may say, I'm willing to risk X number of dollars on this. I'm going to put $50,000 aside, or $100,000 or $500,000, whatever that number is. And the amount depends on your business and your financial situation, of course. But your financial situation is another one of those outside pressures that can help you decide whether you should take this plunge or not.
Hi, Jay. It's Marissa.
Yes.
Quick question from the audience. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by infrastructure, and what are some of the things that someone should be thinking about as that will cost money as they set up their business?
Absolutely. And instead of doing it right now, there's a slide coming up that will answer that question probably in more detail than you even want. Okay?
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. So here's a few killer phrases. These are things that I hear from people very often, and it's like, oh boy, slow down. One of them is, I don't like sales. And we talked about that a little bit before. If you don't like sales, it's going to be really hard for you to be a full-time entrepreneur, no matter what. And I'm not talking about just simply selling clients and customers. You're going to have to sell a lot of people on a lot of things. You're going to have to sell investors if you need. You're going to have to sell suppliers on giving you favorable terms, even though you're just starting out. You're going to have to sell anybody who's supporting you on doing these things. So there's a lot of salesmanship that comes into play when you're an entrepreneur, and things that you don't necessarily think about. But really, when it comes down to it, if you are the business owner, you really need to sell. And even if you can afford to hire salespeople right off the bat, or you have a partner who's focused on sales, well, that's great. If you have a partner who's focused on sales, you don't necessarily have to worry about it so much. But if you are just going to be a solo entrepreneur and you don't like sales, you're going to have a tough time. And similar to that is, I'm not good at self-promotion. And I actually heard this recently from a friend who was having a real struggle in his business. He's had his business for about, 3 or 4 years. And it never really did much. And he basically just admitted he's just not good at self-promotion. when you hear that, then it's like, okay, you might want to look at getting a job, because entrepreneurs have to be good self-promoters. Especially, there's so many great outlets in today's world to promote your business that you really have to be very good at that. The people I see who are successful, and if you think about it, the people around you who are successful are very good at promoting themselves. They're very good at, and they may not even be good at what they do, but they're really good at promoting. One of my closest friends is an extremely successful entrepreneur. He sold his business for a couple $100 million, and remember, the advice to me was, operations is overrated. It's really all about sales. It's like we spend half our time apologizing to our customers about why this or that didn't come out perfectly. But if you don't have a sales organization, if you're not promoting your business, then what do you have? You don't really have a business. So he was very big on sales, and I agree with that. Another one is I like doing the work. And this goes back to what do you like doing the best. If you really like doing the work, then being an entrepreneur may not be the right thing for you. And this depends. This makes no difference as whether it's a service business or a product business. If you like doing the work, it's not really a reason to be an entrepreneur. As you can imagine, entrepreneurship has a lot more around it. Okay. So another one is I am the business. That's a tough one, and I've struggled with that one myself for a number of years. If you are the business, then you are a slave to your business. Basically, if the business stops because you're not around, then how can you ever go on vacation without losing business and potentially losing clients when something goes wrong and you're not around? So if you are the business, and if you think that you're going to be the business, then it's going to be a struggle. There's going to be a lot of friction for you. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, because in many cases you have to be the business until you can hire someone. But you need to be good at sales. You need to be good at self-promotion. You need to hire people to do the work. You need to hire people to do potentially the management and maybe even the sales at some point. But if the business stops when you stop, then that is a sign of that's a sign of friction there. Okay. So here's some more terms and things that we'll give a little caution to. One is my clients or my customers will come with me. So if you have a business right now, if you're working for a company right now and you're thinking about jumping ship and becoming an entrepreneur and taking a few clients with you, that's a very dangerous statement. It may happen, and they may say, yeah, sure, you go on your own, I'll come with you. But that doesn't always work out that way. It's hard, and it very often is outside of the control of your immediate clients and customers. They may come with you and they may not. What if they do? What if somebody else comes along and takes them away? That's a tough one. Relying on clients and customers to come with you. Now, again, it may happen. It happened to me, but I didn't rely on it. Another one is people will take my calls, and the reason I put that on there is because when you're part of a larger organization that has a brand, that has a track record, and you call up clients and customers and prospects, people take your calls. But now when you're all of a sudden on your own or starting a little company that has no brand recognition, that has no track record, those same people are going to stop taking your calls. And again, maybe not, but I've seen this happen many times where it's just people are you never get fired for hiring IBM is the old saying, because people like to have stability, they like to have a brand name, they like to have a track record. You personally may have a track record, but companies don't like to take a lot of risks. I have one big client. That's a big danger point right there. Now, obviously, it's because what happens if that client goes away. So if you have a business where you have one big client and maybe a couple little ones, that's a danger sign for taking this plunge and doing it full time. Or one big client, one big customer, same thing. So if you're doing something part-time and you're relying on one customer, you may want to work hard and say, go ahead and do it, but the first thing you want to do is work really hard to broaden your base of customers. That should be your number one priority, so the risk isn't so strong. Okay. I want to be my own boss. That's like the biggest misnomer of anything. I look at it right now and I say, well, I'd love to be my own boss when I was working, and now I have probably 12 bosses. Sometimes I'd like to just have one. As an entrepreneur, you typically, have a lot of bosses. Your customers are your bosses, and your clients are your bosses. You may not have anybody within your organization, but you definitely have bosses. So if you just want to be your own boss, that's really not the reason to take the plunge. My education gives me an edge. This may or may not be true. You see a lot of these tech startups with kids from Harvard and Stanford and MIT, and sure, their education probably gives them an edge. But if you look throughout history at very successful people, very successful entrepreneurs, what you find is that education doesn't really have a lot of influence. Once you get to a certain level, education kind of goes by the wayside. And people who with high school degrees do just as well as Harvard grads. There's really no correlation. Good job. So why shouldn't I be doing this for myself? I remember being down in Florida staying at the house of a very successful entrepreneur, and somebody I was staying with who was a lawyer was like, gosh, look at this beautiful house, and I'm probably as good at my job as she is at hers, and why does she have this house? Because being really good at your job does not translate to being a successful entrepreneur. You could be the best lawyer ever, but it doesn't necessarily make you the best business person. So I'd be careful of that statement. And another one very similar to that is, I'm smart. Another quote from that good friend of mine that's a very successful entrepreneur, he said to me that, smart people don't necessarily make the best entrepreneurs. In fact, most smart people will figure out a reason not to do something and talk themselves out of it. Whereas people who aren't maybe quite as smart, they'll dive in anyway and they'll figure it out. They'll bully through it. I think there's a new book out called Grit that talks about how people with grit have a lot of success. And they don't say smart, they don't say educated, they say people who are savvy. And sorry, I haven't read the book, but it sounds like that concept makes a lot of sense to me, where the smartest people don't make the best entrepreneurs. It's people who are going to focus, it's people who are going to bully through things, that are going to make mistakes and come back. Another one is, I need to start big. And this is a typical issue with older entrepreneurs, because we tend to think that, gosh, I don't have enough time to build this little business into a larger organization. I need to start big right now. So they try to overdo it. They try to raise a bunch of money and hire a bunch of people and start out with this big, presence. And it's very expensive and it's very risky, and it's not the right path. I'll give you a quick story on that one. I have a good friend of mine who has been kind of a lifetime entrepreneur. He was probably in his late 50s at the time. His wife was a lawyer, very successful lawyer. They made a lot of money. She made a lot of money. And in his words, it allowed him to swing for the fences. So he wanted to start a dog kennel business. But he didn't want to start with a small footprint dog kennel. He wanted to go real big and have this huge warehouse and have all these gadgets and newfangled features in this thing. And it's very, very expensive. And while he was trying to figure through this whole thing and raise money, there was probably a dozen startups that came up and started small and have been very successful in that business just in Chicago where we live. So needing to start big is not a reason to take the plunge, not at all. It's very, very high risk. Another one is I can deliver at a lower cost. If you think you can deliver at a lower cost, you may be able to do that, but don't you think that maybe there's somebody else out there who can match that cost or beat that cost? And the reason that this gives me caution to tell somebody to go ahead and take the plunge is because you don't even want to be the person who can deliver at a lower cost, because all you're doing is you're racing to the bottom. You're racing to zero margin, and that's not the kind of a place you want to be. So sure, you probably can deliver at a lower cost than your current company's doing, or there's competitors out there doing, but I want to make sure that if you are delivering at a lower cost, you're not delivering at a lower margin. And again, it's something that you want to be careful of, because you don't want to get into this spiral, this downward spiral race to the bottom line cost. And another one is I just love this industry. It's great if you love this industry. The young entrepreneur I was talking about earlier, who started his business and was wondering if he should go in full time, and it eventually did. He was in the golf industry, and he was a golfer, and he loves the industry. But he also, came up with a great idea, and he's since pivoted that idea, and he loves to promote himself and his business, and he had some money in the bank, and so many other things that that were in his favor. But if you're a biker, if you're a skier, and you have a passion for the business or for the industry, it doesn't necessarily mean you are going to be a good entrepreneur in that industry, however it may be. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about money. You certainly want to project about how much you're going to need in your business, and I'm sure everybody's gone through the spreadsheet and come up with how much money they're going to need, and where that break-even point is, and all those other fun things. Now, if you've done that, you should take that spreadsheet and just double all the numbers. I mean, it's so funny the way it works out, but you really just need to double it. Oh, and while you're at it, double the time that it's going to take to get where you need to go. The time that it's taken, the amount of work it's going to take, the time that it's going to take to get where you need to be. The beauty about this particular time in history is that money is very cheap right now. Interest rates are at an all-time low. So being able, if you're interested in borrowing money, being able to borrow money, it's a great time to do it. The friction is much less. Those outside factors, again, friction is much less if you're looking at borrowing money right now. It's very cheap. And there's a lot of new sources of funding out there, as you know, and we'll go through a couple later, but things like Kickstarter and other funding methods out there. The Jobs Act from a few years ago, some of you may remember, that has opened up and allowed more people to invest in businesses. So there's money that's available out there, and it's really done a great job of kickstarting this economy. Okay. Now, stability is another area that I think is really important that people don't think about, and this gets to that question earlier. The next two slides get to that question. As an entrepreneur, no matter what your business is, you need to create your own business ecosystem. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to be successful. You're just going to be very frazzled and in a panic all of the time. So you need to create your own stability. So processes, doing what you need to do to get things done to be more efficient. Ideas, new ideas that are coming up that you should be looking at. As companies, you guys are probably very familiar with offsites and other kinds of brainstorming. You have to have time, build in time to be able to think about your business, structure of the business, and that's really just roles and responsibilities, even compartmentalizing yourself into certain roles and responsibilities, and infrastructure for the business, a payroll system, whatever it happens to be. Routines. You need to be able to make sure that you have your own personal routines in place. And another one is evaluations. If you work for a decent-sized company, I'm sure they have very structured evaluations that they're doing on yourself and your peers. You want to have the same thing. You want to be able to put those kinds of processes and things in place. So if you have 1 or 2 employees, it's still really important to do evaluations on them. They want it, they need it, you need it. So even if you're doing an evaluation on yourself, and there's plenty of forms out there that are available, but you want to be able to make sure that you put your own stability. And are you ready to do that? Can you do that? Do you have the skills? Do you have the history to be able to do that? Okay. Okay, so the next one is time and money. And this is where these other areas within a business, and what I've done here is I've just taken from my QuickBooks where I've spent money, and then I've taken from my timesheets and from just my brain where I've spent my time. So this word chart, basically this word cloud, is most of the things that I do outside of doing the actual work in the business, of where am I spending my time and where am I spending my money? What are all these things? First of all, suppliers. These are people who are helping me deliver what we do from our marketing services. These are people who are doing work for me, who are delivering these services, not employees. This is outside of employees. So I spend a lot of time and, of course, a lot of money on suppliers. Rent and real estate, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about these things, but as a business owner here in Chicago, rent is not cheap, so that's a big expense for me. And real estate, I spend a decent amount of time every few years, actually, just dealing with those kinds of issues. Computer hardware and software, ISP and data center. So my business happens to use a lot of technology. We buy software, we buy hardware. I have all these data center costs. These are factors that are involved in there. Another is here U.S. IRS. That's basically taxes. So you don't think about I guess we do think about it, but taxes is important. But then there's payroll. There's hiring. If you want to hire somebody, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time and a lot of energy in hiring somebody, and that's time away from your business. The telephone. I spend a lot of time on the telephone and money too. I'm surprised how expensive it is, but I know that there's ways to get around it, but it's still, I don't know, for some reason it ends up taking a lot of money. Health insurance, that's really important. If you're lucky enough, if you have someone else in your household who is working and has health insurance, that's great. But there's also business insurance down below. Notice there. That's something that nobody else can take care of for you outside. You have to take care of that, and that can be workers' compensation. Most businesses need at least $2 million of just general business insurance. There's also I think directors and operators insurance. There's a bunch of other, depending on your business, there's a bunch of other things you need to think about. Accounting. You're going to have to hire an accountant, and that can be expensive. And not only that, it takes time. It takes time to do that. Banking takes time. A garage for parking, that kind of thing. It may be a garage. We have. I live in the city, and I work in the city too. So I park the cars, and that's now I don't have a company to pay for that. I have to pay for that. City fees, office supplies, other consultants that you're working with, legal, of course, is a big one. All of these take time and take money. Okay, so how about a pop quiz for the last part of the presentation? There's going to be 7 questions, and this, of course, is more for fun than anything, but it can give you a good idea on whether you're ready to take the plunge. And a lot of it's based on what we've talked about. So if you've got a piece of paper in front of you, just write down the numbers 1 through 7, and then you're going to be writing a letter next to each one. Okay? So first question, how often have you changed jobs? Every 1 or 2 years? Give yourself an A. 3 to 5, a B. 6 to 10 or so, a C. And if you're just starting out, a D. And again, these won't fit perfectly into anybody's, into everyone's situation, but just, choose one that you think is most relevant. Okay. Question 2, what aspects of the business do you like? Answering that question we had early on. Do you like doing the work? Do you like selling? Do you like managing others? Be honest. Okay. Third question, how much money do you have? Do you have enough to last you a few months, like less than a year without any income at all? Do you have enough to last a year or so without any income, or do you have enough to last you 2 or more years without any income? Again, this may or may not be relevant to your situation or your business, but just humor me. Okay. Fourth question, do you need to raise or borrow money to become a full-time entrepreneur? Definitely, probably, not sure, probably not, definitely not. Okay, so answer either A through A on those. And then fifth, what is your life stage? Are you single or divorced and you have no dependent children? Are you single or divorced and you do have dependent children? Are you married with a spouse who works without dependent kids? Are you married with a spouse who does not work? You're the only breadwinner and you do not have any kids. And then same thing where you do have kids. Either you're married, your spouse works, and spouse doesn't work. And if I don't know if there's anything else outside of those choices, but just kind of choose one that you think makes most sense for you. Okay, and question 6, why are you considering becoming an entrepreneur? What's the best answer here? I'm sure there's probably more than one, but if you were laid off or somehow not working and it just seems like the right time to start a business, if you're having trouble finding a job, okay, you could be laid off but easily find another job, but just feel that, hey, now's a good time, I'm going to take this chance. But if you're laid off and you're having trouble, or you're fired or whatever, and you're having trouble finding a new job, or you're just starting out having trouble finding a job, then you would choose B. Okay, you're just tired of working for other people. I don't want to work for anyone else. You've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. There, you just have to kind of, judge for yourself whether that's the best answer for you out of these. And if you have a great business idea that you've always wanted to try, or you have a business, again, you have a business idea and you've planned it, you've tested it, maybe you've been working on it part-time, you're just trying to figure out if you should take the plunge now. And then final question is, my business idea is very unique. There's nothing like it out there. It's very, very unique. Or it's similar to other businesses, but there are some differences. I'm going to do things a little different, but it's very similar to, an accounting firm is an accounting firm, a law firm is a law firm. Construction company is a construction company. I may do things a little different, but it's very similar to other businesses that are out there. And thirdly is it's a very common business, but I know it really, really well. Okay. So let's see how you did. What I'd like you to do now is next to each one of those questions, you should have a letter. So for question 1, if you chose A, give yourself 1 point. If you chose B, give yourself 3. If you chose C, give yourself 5. D, give yourself 4. And then just go right down the chart here. Hopefully you can understand how it works. So again, for question 2, if you chose A, give yourself 2 points. B, 5. And I'll give you just a moment to go down that chart and then go ahead and add things up. Okay. So, how'd you do? There was, I think, 36 points available, 36 or 37, not sure. But If you've scored 30 or more, then it seems like there's not a lot of friction for you. You're ready to go. Dive right in. If you scored kind of between 20 and 29, you might want to proceed with caution. See where some of your lower scoring options were, and maybe try and shore those up if you can before you dive in. And then 10 through 19, you probably have a number of areas that you need to shore up and think about, and there's probably a lot of friction that are working against you, but yeah, again, doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't do it. If you're below 10, though, you might not want to quit your day job. Okay. And finally, some resources. And I'm going to go through these pretty quick. I know we're running a little low on time. We want to answer any questions that are out there. There's a couple of books that I really, really like. One is called The E-Myth, and I think there's a second version called The E-Myth Revisited, which is just an updated version. It's by Michael Gerber. Of course, it's available anywhere, most bookstores and on Amazon. It's called The E-Myth. Really, really great book about entrepreneurship and how you should structure your business. The second one is called Built to Sell. This is by John Warrillow, and it's, again, available anywhere. These books, what I really like about them is they use kind of a fake case study to talk about to lay out their plan. Built to Sell is about, it's very relevant to people who want to start some kind of a professional services, more of a services organization. The E-Myth can really, for any, especially product businesses, but for any business, it makes sense. Okay, those are two of my favorites. Another one is, this is called Biz Buy Sell, and this is a marketplace for people who want to buy and sell businesses. So this is just one example. There's lots of these out there. These are great places if you want to take the entrepreneurial plunge, but you don't have a solid business. It might make sense for you to buy someone else's business. And again, with the money situation these days, it's so easy to be able to get money to do these kinds of things. And you'd be amazed at how cheap there are some of these businesses and affordable they are to buy. And again, there's lots of others. I'm just kind of giving you some of the more popular versions of these. Kickstarter, I think I might have mentioned Kickstarter earlier. There's lots of new ways to finance your business. So these are great. They're if you have something out there that you want to raise money without necessarily giving away equity. There are platforms like Kickstarter. Kickstarter allows you to put your business on their platform and promote that business. It's a business idea, and then allows people to fund you, to literally pledge on their credit card, and they get something. Typically, it's something. Maybe it's some of your product, or something that is not equity in the business. WeWork is a shared office space. So if you do something that you can't work at home, and again, WeWork is just an example, but there's lots of these in every city out there. Even smaller towns or medium-sized towns have them. And these are shared office spaces where you can come in and the beauty of it is you're surrounded by other entrepreneurs who have taken the plunge and are working full-time on their businesses. It's really great stuff. So there's lots of these out there. WeWork is one of the bigger ones if you live in a larger city. Techstars is an incubator. You may have heard that term, and they're not just for technology companies. Techstars, that kind of is, but there's lots of incubators out there that will help you take the plunge. They'll support you financially. They will support you with expertise. And typically you will pitch these businesses to get invited to get into there, and they're typically a short duration, anywhere from a few months to maybe a year. But these are great resources to help you start that business and take that plunge with a little bit of support behind you. And then the penultimate one here is the Kaufman Foundation. You may have heard this or heard of it or seen it. It's a great, I'm not sure the website, but if you just Google Kaufman Foundation, this is a really good one, and it focuses just exclusively for entrepreneurs and how to start businesses and what you should do. You probably can take some other quizzes on there, but the Kaufman Foundation is excellent. And then finally, just other entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs. Talk to as many as you can find, get advice, seek them out. other successful entrepreneurs will be your best resource. Okay? Well, that's it, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Hey, I have a quick question for you, Jay.
Yeah. Yes.
Early in your presentation, you talked about the 3 questions, and I was wondering if there was a specific resource that you just referred to that you got that from, or if there's some other place that you developed or saw that.
No, those 3 questions kind of come from my lifetime of experience and working with people, and there wasn't one specific resource for those questions. They've kind of been compiled with things that I've read over the past and experiences that I've had and seen with other people as well as myself.
Okay. If anybody else has another question, we have a couple of minutes to take them on, but you have to type quickly into the question box. I don't see anything popping up. So, Tim, do you think we're good to go?
I think we're good. I know I scored a 19, so I got to shore some things up before I take the plunge. But but with that, again, on behalf of the Bryant Alumni Association, I'd like to thank Jay and Marissa for a great presentation. And most of all, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. Please look for our survey in your email. And this concludes today's webinar. Thanks and have a great afternoon.